Welcome to the Spa Girls podcast, the self-publishing podcast for authors. You're in the right place for the best writing, marketing, and publishing advice, plus interviews with industry experts and best-selling authors. I'm Cheryl Phipps.
I'm Shah Barrett.
And I'm Wendy Vella. And we have no Trudy J today. She's not here. So it's just the three of us. And we have an amazing guest back in the spa, Helen B. Scheuerer.
Welcome back, Helen.
Thanks for having me back. I think this is my third time.
You're going to be one of us soon.
Yeah, you're one of the rare club, the three club.
We are.
There's only single digits of those people, so
She's done well.
I'm very special.
You are, and a huge congratulations to Helen today because she's launched a new book, and it is called How to Launch a Successful Series. But before we kick into that, Shah's going to read the bio.
Okay.
Lovely.
So Helen B. Scheuerer is the best-selling fantasy author of the series, The Oromia Chronicles, Curse of the Siren Queen, and the Legends of Thesma. I'm pretty sure I butchered that one.
Yeah.
Her work has been highly praised for its strong, flawed female characters and its action-packed plots. She also publishes advice for authors with her non-fiction series, Books for Career Authors. Helen's love of writing and books led her to pursue a creative writing degree and a Masters of Publishing. She has been a full-time author since 2018 and now lives amidst the mountains in New Zealand, where she is constantly dreaming up new stories.
Wow.
So again, welcome, Helen. It's wonderful to have you back again.
Thanks, guys. Thrilled to be here.
Well, the first question I actually want to ask is, can you tell me why you wrote this book in particular?
Yeah, sure. So I think the last time I talked to you guys, we were talking about my first nonfiction book, which was How to Write a Successful Series.
Mm-hmm.
And I was telling someone the other day, that book was actually much bigger initially, and it encompassed the writing and the publishing and the marketing. And it ended up being quite a big book. And so my friend Sasha, who you've just had on the show, I think, she and I beta read for each other. And she basically said, you've got more than one book in this book. And so then I sort of split it up and decided I would do the first one, How to Write a Successful Series. And then the sort of natural follow on to that was How to Launch a Successful Series, which sort of incorporates the publishing and marketing aspects and the strategies behind that sort of thing. So, yeah, and I think out of the two, this one's my favorite because it's very strategy focused and I love all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's sort of the story behind that.
If anyone is evidenced by the beautiful background behind you with the organized, you need to go to YouTube and look at Helen's beautiful charts on her wall. I just want to just stand there in awe of that organization. And I'm guessing that's
envy.
Total. There's colours, there's coordination, there's lines, there's linear paths. It's a work of art there behind.
Oh, thank you. I get a lot of joy from it, but that's like the nerdy side of me just loves that stuff.
Yeah. I would love to be like that. Like I would love to be nerdy. I've never written a chart in my life, but that looks awesome, man. I just like that on my wall.
The problem is when it doesn't go to plan and you've got to change it all.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's start with a basic question. I think Shah wanted to ask this one.
Yeah, it was really just, what do you define as a series, Helen?
So I suppose there are different types of series, but generally it's a group of books that are grouped together by a theme or something like that. But in terms of how I view it, there are two types. There's a dynamic or like a subsequent series. So you've got book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4, and you've got to read them in order, and it's the same narrative throughout, same characters. Or you've got a static series, which is more common in, I suppose, contemporary romance or crime, where you have either one character and one detective case, for instance, per book, and you don't have to read them in order. You can pick them up wherever. Or say contemporary romance, where it might be a new couple per book. And so a plot self-contained to one book, and maybe the series works its way through the family or the group of friends or something like that. So those are my sort of two definitions. You've got the bingeable, you have to read from start to finish, or you've got each story is self-contained in the series, but it's still a series because it's either set in the same place or it follows through a cast of characters, or it's the same detective and he's got a different case per book, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And so we're going to link in the show notes to the 2 previous episodes that we've had with Helen, particularly the one on writing a series, and why you should, and why we always recommend that you, as an author, that you think about your work in the form of a series. And so, yeah, I'll just put that in there so we can leave that to one side.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot more about this particular topic in that previous episode, because it's covered a lot more in depth in that particular book.
Yeah.
Just looking at the blurb on the book, we'll sort of work our way through some of the things there. But I just want to touch on Backmatter, and you talk about optimizing read through. Why do you think Backmatter is so vitally important in series?
Well, just because that is your prime real estate for selling the next book in the series, and it can determine whether people just close the book and go do something else, or they click and buy the next book. And I suppose, like Backmatter, I think we talk about newsletter signups, website links, pre-order links, author bios, requests for reviews. So that is all your Backmatter. But when we're talking about optimizing Backmatter, I'm specifically talking about optimizing it to catch that next sale while that lead is hot. So especially for series, it's like built perfectly for that, whether you write a dynamic series or a series of standalones, interconnected standalones, a static series, because that reader hopefully finishes the book and wants more. And if the link is right there, and one thing that I've learned, so I used to, previously in other series I've done, I would do all the things, have the request for review, have the newsletter sign up, have the acknowledgements like before all of that stuff. So now I sort of twist it around so that the first thing that you get when it says the end is, do you want to know what happens next? Click here. And it's not even a new page. I might do an ornamental break or something like that, but it'll literally be, here's where you get the next installment of this story. And that's worked really, really well, because somebody can absolutely love that story and be completely addicted, want to binge it, but if you've got your acknowledgements, your author bio, request for review, whatever else all in front of that key thing, they might not actually get to that link. So that's, I talk a bit about that in the book. It's just how to sort of structure that and really utilize that one click link at the end.
I think it's vitally important. I think like Backmatter, I know Cher's probably the same as me. We've changed ours quite a lot over the years.
So many times, because there are different ways to do the same thing, and I think it has changed. Putting everything in there after your book finishes, it does kind of dilute it, doesn't it? It's
absolutely. And I suppose it depends on what your personal goal is. Like, so maybe you don't have a book up for pre-order that comes after that one. Maybe it won't come out for another year, and you don't like the pressure of having a pre-order. Like, everybody's different. So then the question becomes, well, what is the goal? Is it to get people on your mailing list so that when you do have that next book ready, you've got people warm and ready to receive that information? Or maybe it's your first book and you're really conscious that you don't have enough reviews. Maybe then it's, please leave a review, it means the world to us authors, blah blah blah. So it depends on what your goals are, what your plans are for the series going forward, that kind of thing. So everybody's different.
But it's important to have a clear call to action, isn't it?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
With that in mind, Helen, with the books that you have, do you change it up in different series? Like, do you always have the same first call to action, as in the next book? Or would you, if you were finishing a series but you would like them to go to another series, do you do that? Or do you maybe do a newsletter one from time to time?
I always include the newsletter one after the pre-order, just because I also offer for newsletter subscribers usually related content to that book. So it might be an alternate point of view chapter, it might be a prequel novella. So I've got those assets to then utilize. So I don't want to not say anything. It's just sort
Yeah.
of what comes first.
Yeah.
Yes.
And in terms of like what I do per series, I guess it changes. So at the end of my first series, I didn't actually utilize pre-orders at all for my first ever series. I only had a book coming out a year, so it was quite different. I launched those books at 99 cents each, and it was also a very different time in publishing.
Yeah.
Whereas at the end of my second series, I didn't yet have up the pre-order for the next first in series. So that's when I utilized sign up for my newsletter and you will get the prequel story to my new series.
Right. Yeah.
So it just sort of depends strategy wise what you're trying to do. For this year, I've basically done the same thing for every book, which is, you know, the final line of the book, ornamental break. Want to know what happens to X and Y next? Click here, buy the next book, or pre-order the next book. So yeah, it does change, and I think it mainly changes between the end of a series and the start of a new one.
Yeah.
Right.
Generally from a series that's ongoing, it's the link is always the pre-order to the next book for me.
Yeah. And that's what you want, isn't it? You want
That's
them
a
to
good
buy.
point too.
Yeah. You want them to buy. That's it. They're already hot. They've just read the story. They loved it. What's
Exactly.
next? How can I get more of this?
And especially if it ends on a cliffhanger, which mine generally do, because I write that dynamic style of series where you have to keep reading through. They all end on a cliffhanger. So the first thing I want them to think is, oh my God, I want to know what happens next. And I want to be the first to know. So hit that pre-order button. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect
So
sense.
as part of your you talk in your book about the power of, or the potential of pre-orders, which you've covered a little bit now, but I'm just wondering if you could just expand on that a bit. Are pre-orders suitable for authors at all stages of their writing? Like if you've got, say, maybe 1 or 2 books versus 20 kind of thing?
Yeah.
Like, how does it change, or does it?
Well, I think it depends on your personal goals, your personal style of launching, and, you know, how you work under pressure, all those sorts of things. So, you know, if I was a brand new author launching a book 1 in a brand new series, I probably wouldn't do a super long pre-order period. Maybe I would go for more of a bang sort of launch, like, rather than a slow lead up. I want that burst in the rankings and stuff like that. Whereas once you've been doing it for a while, for me personally, one of the benefits of doing pre-orders is just having the link. So to be able to schedule promotions, to be able to, schedule my newsletters, to give the links to reviewers, to collaborate with other authors, and all that sort of prep work ahead of a launch for me, because I like, as you can see behind me, I like being organized. So when I launched my first series, I launched all of those live. So literally pressing publish, and then it was live that day. And that worked well back then for me. Again, it was a different time in publishing, but also it meant that it was easier to get higher in my categories in the rankings. Like I was able to get the orange bestseller tags for those books because there was this influx towards it rather than a diluted sales over a longer period of time. But yeah, it really depends. Like I know some people don't like having a pre-order up because there's that hard deadline that you have to meet. And that's a lot of pressure for some people. And I mean, for me personally, I won't put a pre-order of a book up until I either have a draft of that book ready, or I know I will have the draft of that book, because I'm quite an anxious person. I'll just be sat there going, oh my God, what if I don't make that deadline? So yeah, I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think it's a little bit of know thyself.
Yeah.
And in terms of length of pre-order, it's sort of a personal thing, or would it be a subgenre thing as well in terms of expectations?
I mean, for the first in the series, I think that's up to the individual author. Again, if you're like brand new, I don't think you need a 6-month pre-order period or anything like that. I think for the subsequent books in a series, it doesn't matter. It could be 6 months, it could be 9 months, whatever. Generally what I do when I set the pre-order for the next book for when, so say book 1 is about to launch, I'll have book 2 up for pre-order, so I can have that link already in the back matter of book 1. but I always build in a buffer time. So I might intend to have the book come out. So for example, my second book in the current series came out in September, and I have the third book in the series up for pre-order scheduled for May, but I intend to bring that forward to February.
Yeah.
It's just having that buffer time in for maybe the proof copies don't arrive in time, maybe the cover designer has a delay, you know, whatever the thing is, having that buffer time then takes a little bit of that stress off. And then you have the added bonus of saying to your readers, if you think the book's coming out in May, hey, you know what, Christmas surprise, it's coming out in February, and that's like an extra boost of promotion and excitement and buzz and all that sort of thing. So yeah, I think it's a combination of personal preference and what your goals are. Like I suppose the big question often with pre-order versus a shorter pre-order or launching live is the rank or bank sort of argument, I suppose. So I mean, if you're unaware, like we mentioned, if you have a long pre-order, the sales are diluted across that period. Whereas if you have a shorter pre-order or a live launch, all the sales that happen then contribute to that day's rank and that day's sales. So you're more likely to get a higher rank if you have a shorter pre-order period or a no pre-order period, as opposed to like 6-9 months. But then you've got, would you rather capture that hot sale while it happens for the pre-order, or sort of gamble with maybe they miss the fact that the book launched? So there's pros and cons, and it again just depends on what your goals are.
As your career expands, you might adjust that.
100%. Yeah.
And you also get to understand your own publishing stresses and speed and just how long things take. And I think when you're starting off, I think building in a buffer, you know, no matter how long the buffer is probably a good strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you might find, like I've certainly found throughout my career, I went from publishing 1 book a year to now I've done 4 books this year. But that didn't happen overnight. That happened across 6 years of me learning, relearning, optimizing my own production and the way I do things. And I've gotten faster at writing, but I've also got more streamlined in terms of all the other bits and pieces. So what you do today doesn't need to be what you do in 6 years' time.
No,
absolutely.
I think that's a really important, important point, actually. Helen,
everything right across the board with covers, right through blurbs. It can be adjusted and changed.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Sher, go. You got something else?
I was just one thing to add to that is that you know, you can't factor in how people are going to react, the people that do things for you, like art readers and editors and things like that. So it is just a guesstimate. And so by giving yourself a buffer, that it just takes off so much pressure. I mean, I've had a a beta reader, you know, unwell or something like that, and you can't pressure people when they're doing favors for you to make sure that this happens, or even reviewers. Actually, I mean, reviewers probably more so, to get a book up by a certain time, because life happens. So I think that buffer makes a huge difference.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so I'd like to talk a bit about timing around launches and things like that. I mean, for sort of impact and visibility, things like that. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, again, it depends what the individual author has on, what their sort of style is, and, you know, their strengths and stuff. For me personally, like I said, I've gone from launching 1 book a year to I've done 3 fiction launches this year, and all of them have been what I would call major launches. Like they've had ARC team, street team, Instagram book tours. I've done a big influencer marketing campaign myself. What else have I done? Loads of stuff. Each one has been quite a huge undertaking. So knowing that that's the style of launch I wanted to do, I have to start everything quite far in advance. Which means having the book ready. And that, I mean, like a physical print copy, especially if you're wanting to do like influencer marketing or anything like that. So I would say, for example, Blood and Steel, which is the first book in my current series, came out in February this year. And I started the launch planning for that book well over 3 months in advance. And that's because I needed to make sure that I had enough time to physically send things to people.
Yeah.
I wanted the lead time for booking tours, because a lot of these like tour companies now, they book 3 months out in advance. There'll be particular influencers who need 2 months notice to receive and read a book. All those things. And I also tend to schedule everything. I schedule all my social media, I schedule all my newsletters. So, and that takes the pressure off me mentally, and it gives me then the space to keep writing throughout that period. So that's me personally needing that time. I know people who will write the book, publish the book, promote the book, and then the next thing, and it doesn't have to be this huge thing. And in how to launch a successful series, like I do talk about that you don't have to do all this stuff. The launch style can be what you want it to be. So I was saying to someone else, I've just launched. So I've launched the 3 fiction books this year, all very hard launches. And then the book I'm launching today, the nonfiction, it's a soft launch because I don't have much left in the tank. And I'm also trying to build my reserves for the next launch in February. So it's about like assessing what style of launch, how hard you want to launch, and then what your plans are for the rest of the series. Are you rapid releasing? Can you only write 1 book a year? And that then determines the timing of how, like maybe you stockpile, maybe you don't publish for a year because you write all the books and then you rapid release later. So I wish I had like a hard and fast rule for like sort of best timings, but like it really depends on each person's, how much they're writing, how much they want to publish. Budget is another one. Like one thing I've learned, the more and more books I've been writing and publishing each year, is you still have to pay all that, the cover, the editing, the proofing, all of that up front. And especially if you get a couple books ahead, like I am now 2 books ahead. So I've written the book that's coming out in June next year. That's ready to go. But I haven't seen the royalties for book 3 because that's not out yet. And I haven't seen the royalties for book 4, but I've paid for everything for books 4 and 3. And having that budget to pay for all that stuff in advance without getting the return is also a factor to consider when you're plotting out how many releases you want.
You're actually mind-blowingly organized. It's very impressive.
Can I ask you something about the timing of this nonfiction book? Is the fact that it's coming out just before Christmas? Was that planned? Like, you know, we hear so much talk about people not publishing in December or rah, and I'm not sure I'm convinced one way or the other, but do you have a stand on it?
My sort of stance, which who knows if it's right or wrong, but my sort of stance, particularly with nonfiction, is it's actually a good time for nonfiction because everybody's thinking about goals for next year, what they want to achieve. Perfect. Like it, you know, somebody might think, oh, I'm thinking about launching however many books, but I'd really like to have a think about that beforehand. So I'll buy this, you know, this nonfiction that tells me how to do this. And it goes for everything, you know, like writing and publishing, but any sort of goal setting, any sort of like question that you have about life or whatever that you have a book about, that's applicable. Like new year, new me, I'm going to to everything. So
good point.
That's my thinking with the nonfiction anyway.
Totally makes sense.
I think also it comes down to how many books you've got, because I think if you're a well-known writer and you've been writing for a while and people are looking, it doesn't really matter if you put it in December because your people will buy it.
100%.
Right? But
and also maybe where it sits in the series. Like if it's a book 1, like that might be a hard sell, but if people have been waiting for that book 3 in the series, you probably publish it whenever.
Absolutely. And exactly. And I mean, I think we all have different launch strategies. Cher will have a different one from me, and but it doesn't mean to say one's the, you know, you've got to work out what shoe fits you, don't you?
Exactly.
And, I mean, you know, people would look at your board and stuff and go,
Wendy's obsessed with your board now.
Because I know that I never control a board like that. I put a wall planner up at the beginning of the year and I haven't written a word on it. So
see, I'm the opposite. If this is blank, I feel panicked. And I understand that it will change. And I mean, this one behind me, so the 2023 wall planner, I have Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. I've got my production across the whole thing. it didn't account for the fact that 3 weeks of this year I was sick as a dog and couldn't do anything, and
right.
3 different times. So 3 different times I had to move the entire thing around. But I think just for me and how my brain works, like I'm number 2 futuristic, so I need to see the path before me, and if it changes, like I'll deal with it. But if I have no plan, that's where I'm freaking out.
I would love to see the path before me. I'm just too lazy to map it, you know.
I don't think that's true.
I'm the other way around.
Know.
You know how you get overwhelmed if it's not. I get overwhelmed if that was there in front of me. I would be totally overwhelmed and mind blown.
So
I can only,
isn't it?
I can only, like, I've got an assistant. Don't get me wrong. She is like you, you know. But for me, I'm just like, just tell me what I need to know this week.
Today.
Like right now, you know.
So I wanted to ask just about, you mentioned ARC team and reviewers. So just for anybody new, the ARC stands for Advanced Reader Copies, and it's kind of a throwback, isn't it, really, to the past days of traditional publishing where they had advanced readers that were physically sent a copy. Now, for the majority of self-published authors, they send out digital copies. So just wonder if you could just expand on that a little bit, Helen.
So I mean, generally, I suppose the point of an ARC campaign is to generate buzz about the upcoming book. It's hopefully so that when the book launches on launch day, you have a little bit of social proof in the form of Amazon or Goodreads reviews, so that as you're sending people to this link, they can see, oh, it's got a couple of reviews. Some people have read it and liked it. It's just that social proof. So that's sort of the point of it. And I guess it depends. Like, I've sort of changed the way I do things over the years. Like, now I'm much more focused on having a street team, which everybody in a street team gets an ARC, but there's the added element of this is purely for promotion. So anybody on my street team is sort of like a cheerleader for me, essentially. And I have a very basic ARC team, but I'm much more involved in the street team. And the ARC team is one that has just built up over the years. Like, I've been doing this nearly 6 years full time now. And even though I've pivoted into like another subgenre of what I originally did, there is some crossover audience between young adult epic fantasy and adult epic romantic fantasy. Like, there is some sort of crossover there. So some of the reviewers I've got on my ARC team I've had since book 1. And every now and then I'll do like a call out on, there's a couple of Facebook groups that do ARC readers for, and then insert genre here. And you can create like a expression of interest Google form that, and my ones tend to be quite extensive in order to weed out anybody who I pretty much instantly know won't like the book. And so I would just post a form like that and then build the ARC team from there. And how it sort of works is I generally give people 4 weeks to read the book, but I know people who send ARCs the week of release or the week before. But so I use BookFunnel, which you guys have talked about a couple of times on the podcast. So that's a software where you upload your digital files, and then you can create landing pages or certified mail campaigns that, you know, you upload your email list to, of your ARC readers who you've obviously gotten their permission to email. And then they get sent here's your copy of XYZ book to review. You know, you can include a note from the author. Generally, I always include a note, make sure that they know it's an ARC, so that there might be the occasional typo or whatever. I let them know it's absolutely fine if you don't like the book, but please don't tag me in a negative review. Please don't like it, hold off on posting your review until after the promotional period, so you don't, you know, damage all the hard work I've done in the lead up. And also, if you love it, post about it on social media. Feel free to tag me in anything positive, like I'll repost, love all that stuff. And the date that the review is expected, which is usually launch date. And I usually do a certified mail campaign, which allows you to do 3 emails to the ARC team. So you get the initial, here's your review copy. Then to anyone who hasn't opened that email, they can be sent another email that's like, hey, you haven't opened your review copy yet. Here's where you download it again. And then you can do a follow-up email that's like, hey, Books Live, now's the time to post your review. So that's generally how I do it.
So can you tell us how your streets team started and what they actually do for you?
Yeah, sure. So when I first started publishing, I had what I thought was a street team. It was just a Facebook group. I think there were 16 people in it. 2 of the people were related to me. Another person was like, I don't know, like it was one of those. And it was literally just like, can you please post the cover on cover reveal day? And can you please review the book? And that was for the first book in my Oromia Chronicles series. And then I promptly forgot about it for about 5 years and forgot it existed. And so it must have been towards the end of last year, and I was brainstorming all the different things that I wanted to do for this new series. It's, a new subgenre for me. So I was trying to reach a new audience. I was like studying what other people were doing. And I talked to a couple of authors and they're like, oh, you should really do a street team. And I was like, oh, I've never done one before. And it actually took a reader of mine saying, yes, you did. You did one 6 years ago with this. I was in it. And I was like, oh gosh.
Don't you love that?
That was a bit embarrassing. But basically from there, I realized how much I wanted it to evolve from what it was. So how I set it up was I did it similar to the art campaign, did an expression of interest form. I had decided previous to that I was going to run it on a Discord server because I've been in like Facebook groups or Facebook Messenger threads where it's just so hard to follow anything. And the information is just overwhelming. So what I liked about a Discord server was that I could have different channels for different things. I could have a general chat. I could have a spoiler chat. I could have a channel for media materials, which is where you would find all the cover images, my media kit, anything to help the team make content. I had a channel for weekly challenges, a channel for ongoing challenges, and I also had whatever the next book in the series was, I had a channel for teasers for XYZ book, so that as they're finishing the book that they're about to promote, I'm giving them teasers as like a little reward for being in the team for the next book. So they're the first people that get quotes or the working cover, like in progress. So it's really about creating that community. It's about creating that buzz, that element of exclusivity, behind the scenes sort of thing. And so basically then I take the expression of interest form and I do vet it. Like I don't take everybody in it. And especially now that this current series is doing quite well, the amount of people interested has like tripled, and I don't want to manage that amount of people.
What's a good number, do you think?
It really depends. Like I prefer it to be a bit smaller. So I think my last street team had maybe 30 or 40 people, but I also have my assistant helping me. Like I couldn't write full time and manage the street team. But that's because mine is so extensive. Like I think I must have about 10 channels in my Discord for various different things. And they're super active, and it goes on for 4 weeks. But you can do a much smaller version of that. You could do a week-long thing. You could do 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. And maybe you don't do a challenge every week. Maybe you just, ask a question, or you do this, you do that. Like there are varying degrees of how intense it can be. So yeah, I tend to be about 30. I reckon 30-ish sort of people in it is a good amount for me. And they're creating content for me for Instagram and TikTok. They're leaving reviews. They're generating buzz and discussion, not only like outside the group, but inside the group. They're all theorizing with each other, and it's really fun. So that's been quite powerful this year to do that. And it's a lot more sophisticated than my previous Facebook group with my mum in it.
Did you get any pushback from the initial recruitment of potential members that it wasn't on Facebook? I'm just sort of thinking my immediate thought is we kind of used to Facebook, and I totally agree with groups. It's becoming impossible to keep track. That's if people get notifications. It's a post in the group for a start. Discord to me is Gen X is sort of slightly more technical for people to kind of negotiate. How did you kind of talk people through that, or was that part of the Google form? So you kind of that was setting the
it was part of the
rules.
Google form. So it literally says you must be willing to either have Discord already or get a free Discord account to be involved, and you're agreeing to actively participate. And to be fair, most of them already had a Discord, because there's a lot of, especially in romance, or maybe it's fantasy romance, there's a lot of Discord reader groups and stuff. So most people were either had a handle already, or they were like, oh, don't worry, I'll get one. But you make a good point about sort of being quite specific on the form. So particularly for me, going from young adult to romance for adults, I had to be very sort of explicit in terms of the steamy content and the terms of expectations there. So previously I hadn't written any sex scenes, or maybe one or two, but they were very, like, you know, basic. And whereas this series is quite a bit steamier. And so I didn't want someone who had loved my YA fantasy to then go into this and be shocked. And it's really not their cup of tea, which is absolutely fine. So in the Street Team form, it had stuff like, are you willing to have a Discord account? Yes, great. This is where this book rates on a steamy scale, and I would have a graphic of like chili peppers or whatever that explained, you know, fade to black, open door, explicit, you know, 4 or more sex scenes or whatever, and have where the book sat. And it was like, are you comfortable with this content? Yes or no? And you know, and then also like things like trigger warnings, like it's epic fantasy, it's got violence, battles, gore, monsters, that sort of stuff. So being as sort of clear in the Street Team form itself really helps then later when you're doing the recruitment process. You can instantly see if someone's going, no, I won't have a Discord, and no, I don't like Steam in my whatever, then you can be like, well, no. And also at the beginning of the form, it says only successful applicants will be contacted. So you're not having to email.
You don't have to send rejection letters.
So sorry.
Exactly. So that's been really helpful. And I mean, I've done that 3 times now, and each time I've tweaked the form based on something I learned the previous time. The later books in the series, the Street Team form, you have to leave a link to the review of the previous book that you've left, so I know that you've read books 1 and 2, because if you read book 3 out of context, like, it makes no sense. It's a dynamic series. You'll be coming in right at a battle, you know.
So you actually do a Google form for every single book. So once you're on the Street Team, that doesn't automatically give them the right to have the next book?
Pretty much. So at the end of the Street Team period, say I've launched book 1, we've done 4 weeks of promotion, and I do basically an end post that says, oh my God, thank you so much. You've been incredible. As a reward, here is some bonus art no one's seen. Here is the first 3 chapters of the next book that no one's seen. Here's this, that, like, give them a couple of things that I always try and under promise and over deliver, so they don't know they're going to get any of that stuff at the end. That's just a bonus. And then the last thing I do is, if you're interested in the next book in the series, you've got the first access to the expression of interest form. So it doesn't guarantee that they're in it, because I might see that then they actually hated the book, you know, and then why are they on the next Street Team? So I still want that vetting process. But the people who are in the current Street Team get early access to the next Street Team form. And generally, if you were on that Street Team and you had a good time, you're in the next Street Team. It's, you know, I become familiar with the names, and also my assistant helps as well. And we remember, oh, this person posted that great reel, or this person was super active. It's very, I don't think I've yet had to remove someone from the previous, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So you run it from a month from the day of release, or do you start before?
So I've sort of experimented a little bit this year. I think for book one, I did like a 5-week period. So it was like 2 weeks before launch, launch week, and 2 weeks after. And that was too long. I could see the interest, like, because everybody gets the book at the start of the street team. So they're getting it so far ahead that all their excitement and stuff is almost like over by the time launch is happening. And then I did a 3-week one, and I was like, oh, that's a bit short for this amount of people and for what I was trying to do. So then the last one I did was 4 weeks, and I think that was about right. So it was 1 week before the launch week, 1 week after, and maybe 1 week after that. Can't really remember. Something like that. And that was sort of the sweet spot for me.
That's awesome. Wow, my mind is blown again. Every time you come on, I learn something.
I think one of the things that I'm picking up that's been a sort of a recurring theme that I've picked up is that you're tweaking and you're learning as you go, Helen, and I think that's really important for everybody listening to realize that there isn't one right way to do anything in this business, which we say pretty much every episode, but also that as an author, you're learning things about how it works for your particular thing. So you can look at another author and say, this is what they're doing, and by all means use that as
it's like a blueprint.
But also understand that yourself and your work and your subgenre and all of that, it might be slightly different. So I think that's really important, that you're learning as you go, and also what works for you, right? You've got to sustain this. You still got to write books. I think it's very easy to fall into launching or promotion, the giant pit of time that it takes up. So
and forget to write.
And I like the idea of putting a time around that street team, particularly. I think that's a really good idea.
Really good. Actually, I like the idea of a street team. I've heard about it so much, but I've never actually launched into it. Do you reckon it would work for every genre, or do you think that fantasy is really good for it?
I mean, literary fiction probably not so much. But like I'm lucky in that fantasy romance is a very community driven genre, very vocal fans, and they just want it. They want to talk about it all the time to each other. They want to create content. I think romance in general is quite good for it, but also it might be dependent on age. Target age group as well. Like, I think people who are older, who have kids, and they're super busy. They're not sitting there making Instagram graphics for someone they don't know to post like alongside pictures of their kids. So I think I guess part of what I talk about in this book and the previous one is the importance of doing your market research. So having that understanding of your genre. Does TikTok work for my genre? Will street teams work for my genre? Or, I want to do a street team, but maybe Discord isn't the right platform. Maybe it is, like you said, Facebook. Maybe it's Slack. Maybe, there's so many different platforms. Maybe it's just a group of people on Instagram, So having that deeper understanding of your genre and your market will tell you where these platforms are most powerful, which platforms are most powerful, and if certain strategies will work or won't work. I mean, maybe you try it anyway and you're an outlier.
Well, that's right.
Just
and
got to experiment.
Someone always starts, right? There's always the leading light. Well, I think we're sort of coming up to that hour mark now. Is there anything else you just want to, overview about the book or share with us about the book that our listeners would like to hear about?
I suppose about the book is it's quite a personal look at how I deal with series. So at the back of the book, it's got a chapter on each one of my series launches. So a case study on exactly what I did, what worked, what didn't work. And also what I did differently for the second nonfiction book as opposed to the first. Was I actually went out and interviewed quite a lot of authors for this book. So I'm very conscious of, I don't want to just be like, this is my way. And I don't want to say my way is the right way. I want to give a more well-rounded view on how people do things, how people feel about it, what worked, what didn't work. So I interviewed maybe 10 or 12 other successful series authors for this book, and they were very generous with their time and knowledge. And so a lot of most of the chapters have other points of view in it from people in our industry who are killing it. So yeah, that's just something to think about.
Yes. So everybody
Awesome.
needs to read this book, just
Yeah,
saying.
get in there. So where's the best place for people to find you and this book?
Well, this book is available wide. All my nonfiction is wide, as opposed to my fiction, which is in KU. So yeah, Amazon is obviously a big one, but it's everywhere. It should be everywhere, depending on what's decided to link and what hasn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, the book you can get anywhere, and it's available in ebook, paperback, and hardcover. And as for me, you can find me helenscheuerer.com. I've got a bit in my menu for authors specifically, so you can sign up and get bonus bundles for, series checklist, launch checklist, that sort of stuff. And then yeah, my fiction is I usually am most active on Instagram for fiction. So you can, and I mean, that might be an interesting thing just to look at in terms of, you can see my launch strategy through Instagram, like what I'm posting content wise. And yeah, that's about it.
Cool. We'll make sure to put all those links in the show notes as well. And we can be found at spargirlspodcast.com, and we are on YouTube at Spa Girls Podcast. And again, you need to go and look at this recording if you're listening to it, just to see the glory of Helen's
beauty of Helen's board.
backdrop there with her organisation, and Wendy salivating over it.
Absolutely.
And me and Cheryl, to be fair.
Yeah.
Hey, we can also be found at patreon.com/Spa Girls Podcast if you'd like to join us for the new year in our Facebook group and maybe get some coaching from us. So
brilliant.
That's where we are.
Thank you so much, Helen. It was wonderful.
Thank you, Helen.
Thanks, guys.
You'll be hearing more from us next week. But bye. See you later.
Thanks for listening.
Keep
Bye.
well. Bye.
Bye.